Coming up, which of the Nets rookies will shine this season? What is Brooklyn's real future outlook? Is a Cam Thomas return really on the table? I'll answer all those fan questions and more after this.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. The show is 100% free on all those great platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. And on today's show, it's Fan Take Friday. I took questions and takes from all of you on the Nets rookies, the team's future outlook, how Jordi Fernandez will approach the rotation, Cam Thomas, and more. But before that, quick announcement. I have launched a Patreon page for the upcoming Nets season. It's already underway in training camp. And as a subscriber, you guys will get access to uncut interviews, video and audio with players and coaches. You'll get weekly columns. You'll get bonus podcast episodes and more. So go subscribe if you can there. Any support that you guys can provide is much appreciated because you are what allows me to do this as a job and make all of this go. So I'll drop the link to that Patreon underneath in the bio here. It's also on my Twitter page, but go check that out. But now let's get into this Fan Take Friday, rolling on through all of your takes and questions in no particular order that they came in. First question, who is Jordi going to give the first chance to be the facilitator / point on offense? Dioman, Traore, Saraf, Bufkin, or possibly even Cam Thomas or Terrence Mann? The rotation feels so wide open right now. You know, the rotation is wide open right now, I'd say. There are just a lot of ball handlers on this roster. And we spoke to Jordi Fernandez about it yesterday, and he said, you know, having too many ball handlers is not a bad problem to have. But when you look at the rotation, you know, the first chance to be the point guard, I'd say it's, you know, Yegor Dioman, if he's healthy, I think would be the guy. We know he's dealing with that plantar fascia tear. But Sean Marks said that he does expect him to be ready for the start of the regular season. So if he's ready, I would expect him to be the starting point guard. Beyond that, I mean, you know, you have Nolan Traore and Ben Saraf, and I've thought that Traore would be the guy who would be next up. But we have heard about Ben Saraf exceeding expectations, you know, earlier, not exceeding expectations, but just playing really well in the Nets open runs leading up to training camp. The Nets, you know, players, Sean Marks, Jordi Fernandez were all very complimentary of Saraf at Media Day. And Sean Marks actually said that Saraf might be the most NBA ready of all the rookies. So, you know, that maybe could point to him being the next guy up behind Yegor, or even the first guy if Yegor is not healthy to start the regular season. But, you know, I would say it's Yegor, and then I'd say, you know, Nolan and Ben are probably going to be in a competition. And then I would expect, you know, a guy like Kobe Bufkin to probably mix in and have an opportunity there. But I think that he's a guy who can play on or off the ball. So I would say that, you know, that's probably how I'm seeing it. Cam Thomas, I don't really think he's a point guard. Could he spend some minutes there? Maybe, but I don't really think that's all that likely, especially given the fact that the Nets are going to want to focus on the development of these other guys that they drafted. And then Terrence Mann, just not a point guard. So that's how I'm seeing it. Next question. How do you think the Nets will approach the first month of the season if we start off hot like we did last year? Will they sit players or limit minutes? I think that, you know, I've said that, you know, since the end of last season and since, you know, seeing how the way the Nets have operated this offseason, that I think that they're going to have more tanking urgency than they did last year after, you know, locking the 6th best record down and then falling to the 8th pick in the draft. That was obviously a disappointing outcome. And I think that the way they've operated this summer has already showed more urgency. You know, they made 5 first-round picks. All of their point guards are going to be rookies. They didn't bring in a veteran in there. They, you know, prioritize accruing draft capital. So I think they've already showed more urgency. And I think that they're set up where I would be really surprised if they start like they did last year. We all know they had the 10-11 start last year, but that was fueled by, you know, guys like Dennis Schroeder, guys like Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith even playing well. Cam Thomas, obviously, had his good games, but he's the only one who's back of that group. And I think, you know, just with all these rookie ball handlers, you know, leading the offense, I think that they're going to struggle considerably. You also have Michael Porter Jr. transitioning to a role that he's not accustomed to whatsoever, being or having more on-ball opportunities. So I think all of that should lend itself to more struggles. And then you look at the schedule. I did an episode about this when the NBA released the schedule, but 13 of the Nets' first 18 games are against postseason teams from last year. And of the 5 non-postseason matchups, you're playing teams like the 76ers and other teams who aren't, bad. The really bad matchups that the Nets have, or the bad teams they're playing, are like the Hornets and one other team out of these first 18 games. So, I would say I expect them to start out slower, but if they don't by some chance, if Jordi Fernandez cooks up something and they're playing really well, I would expect them to maybe sit some guys more than they did last year, but I'm not sure how early in the season they'll do that. They'll probably do that as the season goes on, if things start to not go in the direction they're hoping for. So I'd say that's how I'm seeing that. Next question. What is the most realistic path, or what is the fastest realistic path to being a contender again? I would say the fastest realistic path to this Nets team being contender again is, first, the rookies and the guys they drafted show a lot of promise out of the gate, and by year 2 or year 3 are looking like rotation guys. And then from there, the Nets are able to use all the draft capital, have whatever financial flexibility they have left, to swing a trade for a star. So then you have these rookies. Let me add in a step. Whoever they draft next year, they spike a top pick in the draft. They get a guy like Darren Peterson, Cam Boozer, AJ DeBansta. That guy looks like a real guy, which I think, all draft analysts and NBA people expect them to. Then you have, this draft class developing well. You have a, true top tier guy coming in next year. You get, 2 years, the guys that we have now developing this season and next. You have whoever they draft next year developing next season. And then after that, in that 2027 year, they're able to swing some kind of a trade for a star, and you have this star, and you have all of these young guys who are already looking like, promising rotation caliber players, and maybe one star in, Darren Peterson, AJ DeBansta, or Cam Boozer. That is the fastest realistic path to being a contender. How realistic is that? Maybe I'm, giving a little grace to the word realistic. I'm not sure how likely that is, but if you're saying what is the fastest path, that's the vision. These young guys showed promise this, rookie season. They continue to develop next season. The Nets spike a top pick. They get a guy who looks like, a promising star level player. And then they're able to swing a trade for a big fish, and they have all that together, and they just, hit the ground running from there. That is it. Not sure how realistic it is. I think a lot of things have to break right. But if you're asking for the fastest path, I would say that's it. Next question. How much cap space do we have left? So I went through the Nets financials after the Kobe Buffkin trade just to see where they're at. And the way that you have to frame this is the Nets have 18 players on standard contracts right now. And 3 of those players are non-guaranteed in Jalen Wilson, Drew Timme, and Tyrese Martin. So during the regular season, you're allowed to carry 15 standard contracts. The Nets have 15 guaranteed guys. So say, which with I think the expectation would be right now that they waive those 3 non-guaranteed guys. If, just taking into account the 15 guaranteed standard contracts, the Nets right now have $19.7 million in cap space. And that's really interesting because they're still around $4.3 million below the salary floor. Like we all know the maneuvers they did with, the 3 guys, David Muoka and, Uriah and all the other guys that they signed who were waived them but had the small partial guaranteed. But those, partial guarantees were only $85,000. So it didn't really put that much of a dent. So there's another move that's going to have to come before, the start of the regular season, because the Nets are $4.3 million below the salary floor. So, what could that look like? It's going to be interesting to see how they approach it. I think there's several ways that they could go about it. They could obviously make another salary dump trade and bring in another player, to add, money. But that's interesting because, it would have to be a player, since in that scenario, you'd have to be sending out or waiving, one of these guys who are on standard contracts that are guaranteed right now. So it'd have to be a player making not a ton of money, but like $8 million or something like that. They also could waive one of their guaranteed players right now. Who are the options? I've spoken about that in the past, but maybe like Dariq Whitehead could be the likeliest guy. I don't know if they'll do that, but if they waive him, his salary, which is somewhere above $3 million, counts towards the books, and then they could keep one of the non-guaranteed guys that have like a $2 million salary, and that would also count. So that would help them get to the salary floor. So there's numerous ways that they can go about it, but that is where the Nets are at from a cap space situation right now. And if they spend up to the salary floor, which is what I've heard for some people, would be to expect them to just spend up to that salary floor and not much above it. And if they do that, they'll have around $15 million in cap space going into the season. And that is going to be valuable as the year progresses, because we see this every year. There's teams around the deadline that are looking to get off money. They're looking to create flexibility. Some teams' seasons didn't go as they hoped. You have a team like the Boston Celtics, who I pointed to, with a guy like Anthony Simons, who I think they'll probably be trying to get off of to dip below the luxury tax and the first apron. So having that cap space going into the year is going to be important. But right now, $19.7 million in space, just accounting for the 15 guys who are on guaranteed contracts, $4.3 million below the salary floor. So we're going to need some more moves before the start of the regular season, and it's going to be interesting to see how they approach that. But I got more questions about the Nets rotation, Cam Thomas, how they're going to approach this season, and more. So I'll get to all that when I continue Locked On Nets after a quick break. Guys, when I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from friends and family, so I got to tell you, I had to give it a try. And let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. I've always had issues with underwear, fit, comfort, just finding the right style for me. Skims changed all of that. Their men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. Guys, I tried the Skims 5-inch boxer brief, and I'm hooked. These are perfect for my active lifestyle. They move with me. They never lose their shape, and trust me, they stay in place all day. So whether I'm working out or just running errands, they're the most comfortable and reliable underwear I've ever owned. Plus, the lightweight material feels amazing, almost like you're wearing nothing at all. Guys, shop Skims Men's at skims.com. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcasts in the survey and select my show in the drop-down menu that follows. Coming back from the break on today's Locked On Nets episode, this Fan Take Friday, rolling on through all of your takes and questions. Nets one. This is a take. It says, based on what we heard at Media Day, I'm no longer ruling Cam Thomas out as a future Net. Sounds to me like Cam wanted to take the QO to stop the Nets from trading him during the season. I think he takes a step this season. The Nets may sign him back. I've said, I did an episode about this after Media Day outlining why I don't think that's going to be the case, and I don't think the Nets are going to sign Cam back. And I think if you just look at the take, look at what you just said. You said, sounds to me like Cam wanted to take the QO to stop the Nets from trading him during the season. If he's and I agree with that, because, he did say the main motivation behind him taking the QO was to keep control of his destiny. And that is, I think your take is correct, to probably keep the Nets from trading him. And I outlined that on my last Cam Thomas podcast. The Nets offered him a 1-year deal at $9.5 million, which was an extra $3.5 million, which would, probably help them reach the salary floor, A, but B, also get him to waive the no trade clause. They, in that deal, he had to waive the no trade clause, and he said no, and he preserved that he sacrificed that $3.5 million to maintain his no trade clause. So if he's taking the QO to stop the Nets from trading him, that's an admission that the Nets want to trade him, and they don't want him on the roster. So that, and, the Nets bringing him back, I'm not sure that those two things make sense. Look, can you say that if Cam has a great year that, the Nets could want to bring him back? Yeah, I'm not going to shut that door. Sean Marks didn't shut that door at Media Day. He said he didn't want to jump to conclusions. But if the Nets wanted to lock up Cam, they would have done it, and they didn't do it. And they risked him taking the QO, and he took the QO, and they lost all control of him as an asset. So that is as clear a sign as you're ever going to get in the NBA that a team is not prioritizing a player. And that, to me, is a sign that the Nets aren't going to bring him back. Look, could the Nets want to bring him back at the offers that they had, at a mid-level exception offer or a short-term offer along those lines? Yeah, they offered him that this year, but that's not what Cam Thomas wants. Cam Thomas wants a big offer. He wants starter level, good starter level money. And that is something that the Nets I don't see paying him. So I think it's unlikely that the Nets bring him back unless they have a change of heart or Cam Thomas has a change of heart in what he's asking for. And I don't think either of those things are all too likely. And next question is also about Cam Thomas. Did Jordi and or Marks publicly say what more they want to see from Cam Thomas. If not, I hope he's been working on dropping weight, quickness, and agility to bump everyone out of the starting point guard spot. 25 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, 7 assists per game, and some defense equals $100 million. I'm not going to disagree with you there. If Cam averages 25 points a game, which would be a career high if he stays healthy, if he has 7 assists per game, which would be, 4 assists above what he's averaged for his career, and plays some defense, which, some defenses, that's pretty ambiguous, but if he's a decent defender, he'll definitely get $100 million in that case. Like, that's all-star level production. But I'd say that's a lot to expect of Cam Thomas. First, you're expecting him to stay healthy after 3 hamstring injuries last year. You're expecting him to have a career high in points, double his assist numbers, and play defense, which is something that we really haven't seen him do up to this point in his career. So could he do it? Like, sure, I think he could do it, but I think it's the most likely scenario? No. And I also, I want to talk a little bit about Cam Thomas right now, because after my last episode, I got, some people in the comments calling me a hater. We're pretty angry about the way that I'm talking about Cam Thomas. And I understand the way that I'm talking about it could be negative, could sound negative sometimes. But most of what I'm talking about is framing it from how I think the Nets are viewing it, because the Nets didn't offer him a deal. And I'm trying to outline the reasons why I don't, what that signals and why I don't think it's likely going to be back. And this also, ties into just the larger Cam Thomas discourse. I've said it seems like there's 2 ends of the spectrum for the Cam Thomas discourse in the Nets fan base. It's the people who are extremely high on him and think he's going to be a star in the future. And it's the people who think that they're, the people who are really low on him and think that he's just like not worth anything and the Nets should just let him go. I've said, I think it's a nuanced topic and it probably falls somewhere in the middle. I think that Cam Thomas can be a good, NBA rotation player who probably on a championship level team is a guy who's coming off the bench and is, being a change of pace scorer and could be a very valuable in a role, similar to what we saw Jordan Poole do on that, Warriors team that won a championship. And that's not just like, that is my opinion, but that's also the opinion of a lot of NBA people throughout the league, executives, scouts, coaches, people that I've spoken to. Other people have relayed that in the media, not just me. So, that's not like, I don't feel like saying that is hating on Cam Thomas. I think the way that we frame the Cam Thomas situation has kind of always been out of whack, because he was the 27th pick in the draft. If you look at where he was drafted and you just frame it from that perspective, he was a late first round pick. Those guys, the overwhelming majority of the time, don't pan out. Cam Thomas is going to have a long NBA career. He'll probably be, end up for his career making $60 to $100 million or even above, whatever. That's a huge success. Like, based on where he was drafted, that's a huge success. But because he has such elite scoring talent, because some people might think that he got drafted too late to begin with, there is this expectation, that he's going to be a star, and anything below that, if, people think below that, or people don't subscribe to that expectation or believe in that it's like hating on him or whatever. And that's not the case. Like, Cam is a very good basketball player. I think he's one of the most talented scorers in the NBA, but basketball is about a lot more than that. And what he wants, what he's reportedly seeking for, the comparisons that his camp had in terms of contracts going into negotiations, was like $30 million annually. And that is, he's asking for money, or he wants a role where he's going to be a starter and one of the highest paid starters on an NBA team. And that is just such a high bar. Like, you have to be so good to reach that level. Like, so few players in the NBA. If we're talking about, players who are the highest paid players on like true contending teams or playoff teams, that's like 30 guys maybe in the whole NBA. And is Cam Thomas going to be a top 30 player? Like, if you don't think so, that's not like hating on him. I think this is a guy, again, who was taking 27th in the draft. Him being a, rotation player in the NBA for years to come and making, salaries in the, $10 million or above annually for a extended runway. That's a huge success story. And I want to say, I like watching Cam Thomas as a player. I think that I love the way that he approaches the game in terms of his confidence. There's other approach, aspects that I'm not so high on, which I've made clear, the defense, the passing, and some of those things. But he's an extremely confident player. He has no fear which is something that I love with players who are just fearless in the moment and want the ball in their hands. I've said I'd rather have a guy like that than a guy who's afraid of the moment. But with Cam Thomas, there's other things that I think he needs to improve on to reach that level that he's, seeing himself at, which is one of the best guards in the league, which is what he told me at the end of this season. So Cam Thomas, I don't see him being back with the Nets. Is it out of the question? No, but I think their actions speak loudly this offseason. So I wouldn't expect that. And I do expect him to catch on somewhere else. And if he proves me wrong and he becomes a top 30 player in the NBA and he's a starting caliber guard on a, playoff caliber team, I would love for Cam to prove me wrong. I'd welcome that. I would eat all the L's, and you guys can come out and, insult me, say whatever you want. I welcome that. I'm rooting for Cam. I hope he has a great NBA career. Got a couple more questions before we go to a break. Are you able to get any updates on Drake Powell's injury? We did get an update yesterday. Drake has been dealing with the tendinopathy in his knee. It's like no structural damage or anything like that, but he didn't play in summer league. He's not doing contact work right now, but he is doing the non-contact portions of Nets practice, and he's moving around. He looks good moving around. The Nets think that he's going to progress to doing contact part of practice soon, and they expect him to be ready for some preseason games. So seems like he'll be ready for the start of the year, and they don't expect that to be that much, that serious or something that's going to linger. Next couple questions before a break, both also about Drake Powell. Expectations for Drake Powell's rookie year. He really intrigues me, but I'm sure he'll spend most of the year with Long Island. And then another question, camp footage has shown Drake Powell fully participating despite recent reports saying he was still recovering, which is a great sign. After Yegor, I think he's going to be the rookie who ends up with the biggest run this season, especially with his defense-first play style. So, first, I just addressed that. Drake, the footage, it looks like he's scrimmaging and all that stuff, but those are still non-contact portions of practice. He has not done contact yet, but in that footage, you can see he's moving around. I've seen him at, practices moving around, and he's moving around well. He is doing like intensive sessions. It's just not the contact portion, and he's going to progress to that. My expectations for Drake's rookie year, I do think that he'll spend some time in Long Island probably because he's a guy that while he has a 3-and-D profile, he shot well, albeit on low volume last year at North Carolina. He was one of the top defenders, out of the nation's freshmen, I would say. Like that stuff he has, but he was extremely limited from an offensive perspective outside of that. Like he had the lowest usage rate among wings to be drafted in the first round in maybe ever, or in like the last 2 decades or something like that. Like he really just never had the ball in his hands outside of spot up shooting or like alley-oops or things like that. He couldn't put the ball on the ground. He's very limited as a scorer outside of that. So I think he's definitely going to need some time in Long Island to develop those skill sets. Do I think that he'll get some NBA run? Yes. And in that, in those opportunities, I think you're just looking for his strengths to try, to stand out. The defense, hoping the defense plays at the NBA level, that he can, put some encouraging reps on tape against good NBA level guys. And the shooting, does the shooting stroke look confident? Can he shoot it from NBA distance? All that. So those are my expectations. I think he'll spend some time in Long Island. When he gets up to the NBA, I think he'll look limited offensively, but you're hoping that his athleticism stands out and jumps off the screen. And you're hoping that defensively, he can do some of those things while shooting on the other end. So that's what I would say for Drake. We got some more questions about Jordi Fernandez, about Nets rotations, and a few other things. So I'll get to all that when I close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. But before that, want to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Guys, FanDuel fits however you like to bet, player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Coming back from the break, closing out today's Locked On Nets episode on this Fan Take Friday. Rolling on through all of your takes and questions. Next one, I hear so much hype about Jordi as a coach, but I don't see why people are so in love with him after one season. Not saying he's bad or anything, but how can we tell he's the guy for the Nets? I'd say I understand what you're saying. Like, it's just 1 year. The Nets were tanking last season. But I'd say what I saw from Jordi last year was extremely encouraging in terms of him getting a team that was one of the least talented in the NBA to punch above its weight on a semi-consistent basis, and really just doing that based off of effort and heart and desire. That was the biggest thing for me. Is I talked to the players in the locker room on a nightly basis. I talked to other coaches. I obviously talked to Jordi, but the players especially were buying into Jordi's message, and they really were, picking up what he was putting down, as the saying goes. Like, they were in it. They were playing hard on most nights. Were there some nights that were bad? Sure. But, there were a lot of nights where they were punching above their weight, and they were competing with teams that they really had no business competing with, just based off of effort. So that, in a taking situation, a coach getting, players to buy into a message like that, I think is really encouraging. I think I like what he preaches defensively. Obviously, he's very about that. And then on the offensive end of the floor, we just saw, a lot of variety in the things that Jordi was doing in terms of the offensive sets he was running, in terms of the ways that he was getting a guy like Cam Johnson open, just really creative, a lot of movement, a lot of off-ball movement, a lot of ball movement. I think the way that he played, the Nets were way down in just like isolation or high pick and roll, which is, the things that NBA teams, kind of default to a lot nowadays. But really creative offense, an offense that I think really is conducive to getting a lot of guys involved, and I think guys will enjoy playing in. And then just what he's preaching on defense and the want to and the buy-in from the players, I think that's all really encouraging. Like, do I get what you're saying? Is it proof that he's the guy? No. We have to see a lot more from Jordi, but I'd say the early returns were about as encouraging as you could hope for them to be. And I think that he is a guy who has a good chance to be the guy for the Nets moving forward. Next question. After Yegor's injury, do you think a Thomas, Mann, MPJ, Clowney, Claxton lineup is realistic to start on opening night? Is it realistic? Like, I could see it. Like, I wouldn't be blown away, but I'd be surprised. Like, if Cam Thomas was the Nets starting point guard, I would be surprised by that, because he's not a point guard. Like, he just isn't a point guard as much as some people want him to be. That's not the role that he's going to play. Could he do it for like some spurts, like short spurts here and there? I think he could if he put his mind to it, but I don't think he's a point guard. And if Yegor's out, I'd probably see, a guy like Nolan Troy or Ben Saraf starting in that spot. Noah Clowney, I probably don't see being in the starting lineup. I think it'll probably be between Terrence Mann and Zaire Williams. So the lineup I've said I'd probably expect is Yegor, CT, Terrence Mann, MPJ, Nick Claxton. Could you put Zaire in that Terrence Mann spot? I think that could, be a realistic, but we'll see. But I would expect that the Nets do have one of the rookie point guards in the starting lineup, or a point guard in the starting lineup, as opposed to Cam Thomas starting in that spot. Next question, both Yegor questions. We got two more. If Yegor's injury is worse than reported, which wouldn't be surprising for the Nets, and he misses opening night, do you think there's a chance Cam Thomas could start the season at point guard? So same thing that I just said. Is there a chance? Like, yeah, there could be a chance. Do I think it's the most likely scenario? No, I would expect the Nets to have another point guard in there. But, these guys that they have are very raw. I think Nolan and Ben, after Yegor, are more raw. I think that they'll have probably some more struggles, and Yegor is going to struggle to begin with. So is there a chance that the Nets could say, we don't think these guys are ready, and they put Cam Thomas at point guard? I think there could be a chance, but also I think that this season's about development. They're going to want to maximize reps for a lot of these guys. So I would expect one of the, true point guards to be in there in the starting lineup. And last question we have, does Yegor start the year in the G League? I would be very surprised if Yegor starts the year in the G League. If if the injury gets worse and maybe he needs to ramp up or something like that, and they stick him in the G League for those purposes, I could see that, but that's not what we've heard from the Nets. We've heard that the injury, isn't that big of a deal. Like, that's verbatim what came out of Yegor's mouth. Do you believe that? That's up to you guys, but I would expect him to be ready for opening night, because that's what Sean Marks has said, and I would expect him to be in the NBA when the Nets open the season. That could change. We'll see. I'll have updates on it all through training camp, but as of now, that is what we have heard. But that's it. All the questions and takes we have on this Fan Take Friday. Thank you to all of you again who participated. If I did not get to your question, I apologize, but I have a time limit on these podcasts, and I went through as many as I can. But the overwhelming support and participation that I get from you guys, I always appreciate all that. But if you do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets wherever you get your podcasts, whether YouTube or Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Go there, subscribe. If you enjoy the content, smash that like button. Only takes a second. Leave a comment. Let me know what you thought about any of these takes or questions. And lastly, as I said at the top, go subscribe to my Patreon page if you guys can. I really appreciate the support. I said, access to uncut interviews, video and audio with players and coaches, weekly bonus podcasts, columns, all of that stuff. I'm going to be trying to get up there throughout the regular season. So any support there is much appreciated, but I'm going to Nets practice right after that. We got a lot more updates. We're going to have the start of the preseason coming around the corner. So I'll have coverage of all that and more when I'm back on Monday talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.